Wyoming Territory. Autumn of 1887. The wind carried the scent of dry pine and gunmetal across the cracked earth as Sheriff Seth Parnell stepped through the saloon doors he had sworn never to enter again. The place smelled like spilled whiskey and regret. Men hunched over their drinks, faces lined with dust and days too long. Seth ignored them. His boots thudded against the warped floor as he headed straight for the far table, where a wiry cowhand had his hand too close to the revolver at his hip. "Get up," Seth said, voice low and even. The man looked up, eyes bloodshot and slow to focus. "Ain't doing nothing wrong. You laid hands on a woman in front of her children," Seth said. "That is wrong enough." The man stood, but not fast enough. Seth had already grabbed him by the collar and shoved him out the door. He hit the dirt like a sack of old grain. The townsfolk watched from porches and windows, silent. Seth turned and saw her. Standing in the doorway of the Mercantile across the street was the woman he had not seen in 6 years. Katherine Sutton. She held a little girl on her hip, no more than 5, and a boy stood beside her, closer to 10. Her hair, the same dark gold he remembered, was braided back tight, and her green eyes had the kind of steadiness that came from surviving things no one should have had to. Seth forgot the drunk. He forgot the ache in his hand from the punch he had thrown. All he saw was her. Katherine's gaze flickered across him, unreadable. She said nothing, just turned, ushered her children inside, and closed the door behind her. For the rest of the day, Seth could not think straight. He had not known she was back. Last he heard, she had married a railroad man in Kansas. But here she was, with 2 children and no husband in sight. Evening came. Seth sat on the back steps of the jailhouse, the bottle beside him unopened. He had not touched a drop in 3 months. Not since he had heard the Suttons' old homestead was being rebuilt by a widow with 2 kids and a spine of iron. He had tried to stay away. He had tried to forget the girl who once rode bareback with him through the cottonwoods, barefoot and laughing like the world could never touch her. But Katherine Sutton was not a girl anymore, and neither was he the boy she had once kissed beneath a blood moon. The next morning, he found her wagon stuck in the mud a mile west of town. "Need a hand?" he asked, stepping down from his horse. Katherine looked up from where she was trying to coax the wheel free. "I can manage." Seth gave her a look. "You have 2 children in the back, a busted axle, and half your load scattered in the ditch." Her chin lifted. "Still not helpless." "I never said you were," he said, and walked to the back, lifting the crate of flour with both hands. She watched him but did not stop him. The little girl, Nora, peeked over the side of the wagon, thumb in her mouth, eyes round. The boy, Nathaniel, climbed down and started helping without a word. By the time they got the wagon free, the sun was high and Katherine's face was streaked with sweat and mud. "You could have sent someone," Seth said. "I do not ask for help unless I need it." "You needed it." She narrowed her eyes. "You are still stubborn." He met her gaze. "You are still the only person who ever made me want to be better." The words hung there. She turned sharply and climbed onto the wagon seat. "Come on, kids." They rolled back toward town, dust rising behind them. Seth stayed where he was, heart pounding harder than it had in years. That night he did not drink. He sat on the porch of the jailhouse, watching the stars come out. He thought about the way Katherine's fingers had trembled slightly when she reached for the reins. He thought about the way the boy had looked at him cautious, curious. And he thought about the day she left. 6 years back, he had been drunk by noon most days, angry at the world and himself. She had waited, but only so long. Then the letters stopped. He never blamed her. He just figured she was gone for good. But life had circled around like it always did. And now she was here, with 2 children and a heart probably too bruised to trust a man like him. But he had stopped drinking. Not for himself. For her. because she deserved a man who could stay sober for love. And he was going to prove he could be that man. 3 days later, he showed up at her door with a sack of potatoes and a hammer. "Thought you might need a hand with that porch," he said. Katherine looked at the potatoes, then at him. "You are not going to stop showing up, are you?" "No, ma'am," he said. "Not unless you tell me to." She stepped aside. Inside, the house was small but clean. The children were at the table working on letters. Nathaniel gave him a nod. Nora smiled and waved. Seth nodded back. "Afternoon." Katherine handed him the hammer. "Porch boards are warped." He got to work, and by the time the sun dipped low, the porch was solid again. Katherine brought him water, and he drank it slow, sweat on his brow. "You look different," she said, watching him. "Quit whiskey." Her eyes lingered on him. "How long?" 3 months. She nodded slowly. "Why?" Seth stood, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Because you are back, and you deserve more than what I was." She looked away for a long time. When she looked back, something softer had settled behind her eyes. "Supper's ready if you want to stay." He did. They ate by lamplight. The stew was simple, the bread crusty. Nora crawled onto his lap by the end, giggling when he let her braid his mustache. Nathaniel asked if he had ever shot a bandit. Seth told him yes, once, and only because the man had aimed first. After the children were tucked into bed, Katherine walked him out. The moon was high. The night was quiet. "You really quit?" she asked, voice low. He nodded. "Every day I want it. But I want you more." She breathed in slow, and then reached out and touched his hand. "I am not the same girl you remember." "I know. And I have 2 children. That scares most men off." "I am not most men." She looked up at him, her fingers still on his. For the first time in 6 years, her eyes held something like hope, maybe even love, and he would do whatever it took to keep that light in her eyes. He would never touch a drop again. By the 2nd week of October, the wind had turned sharp enough to lift the edges of coats and rattle the porch shingles. Seth showed up each afternoon just before dusk, never earlier, never unannounced. He brought fence wire, flour, or wood slats, always finding something that needed mending or lifting. Katherine never asked him to stay, and he never assumed he would. But most evenings, she waited a beat too long before handing him his hat. That Thursday, Nathaniel was coughing hard enough to bring her out of sleep. She lit the lamp and sat on the edge of his bed, pressing her palm to his brow. Seth's knock came not long after. "I saw the chimney wasn't smoking," he said, holding a parcel wrapped in oilcloth. "Figured something was wrong." "He's burning up," Katherine said, stepping back so he could enter. The boy's cheeks were flushed, his breathing uneven. Seth crouched beside him. "I'll ride for Doc Thurley. He'll come quicker if someone stays with him." Katherine hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get the kettle warm." By the time Seth returned with the doctor, Katherine had boiled water, soaked cloths, and stripped Nathaniel to his undershirt. Nora sat curled on the hearth rug with her doll, watching everything with wide, silent eyes. "Croup," the doctor said after listening hard to the boy's chest. "Not the worst I've seen, but it caught deep. Keep steam going through the night. And someone strong enough to hold him upright if he starts struggling again." "I'll stay," Seth said. Katherine didn't argue. The doctor left, and the house settled into quiet. Seth took the rocker near the stove, Nathaniel leaning against him, wrapped in a wool blanket. Every so often, the boy's breath hitched, and Seth would rub his back in slow circles, murmuring something low and steady. Katherine sat nearby, spooning broth into a tin cup, glancing up only when the wind pushed at the shutters. "You always been good with children?" she asked, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. "No," he said. Didn't know I could be. She looked at him for a long moment. He trusts you. Seth didn't shift his gaze from Nathaniel. I aim to earn that. The kettle hissed as it boiled dry. Katherine stood, refilled it, and stoked the flame higher. His father, she said, not turning, was a decent man once, but Kansas rail work broke him. He turned angry. Not with us. Not at first. Seth didn't speak. One day he never came back. Left a note, no money. Just gone. I'm sorry. She nodded once, then sat again. I stopped believing men could hold steady. Even the good ones. Seth's voice was soft. Maybe some of us had to fall hard before we figured out how to stand. Nathaniel stirred. Seth adjusted the blanket and kept his voice even. Told my brother once I'd never be more than a saddle tramp. Drunk too much, ran too long. He believed it. I did too. What changed? You, he said without hesitation. She didn't reply, but her hand found the edge of the blanket and smoothed it over her son's leg. By dawn, Nathaniel was breathing easier. Katherine dozed in the chair, arms folded, head tipped against the wall. Seth didn't move. He watched the gray light slip through the window, catching the pale strands in her braid and the soft edge of her mouth. When she woke, she looked at him like she'd forgotten he was there. Then her expression softened, slow and unguarded. You stayed all night. You needed me to. She stood, walked to the stove, and poured the last of the coffee. She handed him a cup without a word. Their fingers brushed. He didn't let go. Neither did she. Outside, the frost clung to the grass, brittle and white. Inside, something warmer held quiet, steady, and real. The first snow came early that year, brushing the tops of the cottonwoods and settling in the fields like sifted flour. Katherine stood at the barn door, arms crossed, watching Seth hitch the last of the firewood into place on the sled. Nathaniel, wrapped in his wool coat, helped steady the load, his cheeks flushed from the cold. You'll want to stack it close to the kitchen wall, Seth said, glancing toward her. Keeps it dry. Warms faster, too. Already cleared the corner, Katherine said. Her eyes lingered on the small scar at his temple she'd never noticed before, a faded mark just above the brow. You get that from riding or fighting? Neither, he said. Fell through a loft when I was 12. Tried to walk a rafter like a tightrope. She huffed. Not quite a laugh, but close enough. Broke anything? Just pride. My brother dared me, then told Pa before I hit the ground. Nathaniel climbed up beside the sled, took the reins, and looked to Katherine for permission. Go on, she said, but keep to the low trail. He nodded and snapped the reins. The sled creaked forward, dragging over the frozen ruts. Katherine stepped aside, arms still folded, her breath clouding in the air. Boy's got a careful hand, Seth said. Knows his weight. He watches everything, she replied. Doesn't miss much. They stood in silence while the wind picked up, tugging at the hem of her skirt. Seth adjusted the collar of his coat, then shifted his gaze toward the barn's empty stalls. You planning on keeping livestock through winter? 2 hens and a mule. That's all I can manage right now. You'll need more come spring. I know. He leaned against the post, the snow catching on his lashes. I've got a neighbor up past the ridge. Lost his wife last winter. Keeps to himself, but he's looking to sell off a few dairy goats. Katherine tilted her head. Why would he deal with me? Because I'd be the one asking. She studied him, then stepped inside the barn to grab a basket of feed. He followed, brushing snow from his sleeves. I don't want charity, she said. It's not charity if you're trading for it. And what am I trading? Seth shrugged. Your bread's better than anything I've had in years. You've got a hand with sewing too. Man needs mending done. He can bring the goats down himself. She set the basket down and reached for a pail. You're sure that's all? I don't barter with promises, he said. Then, quieter, not anymore. Her fingers stilled on the handle. You used to. He didn't look away. I used to lie to myself most of all. Catherine's gaze held his, steady and unreadable. Then she dipped the pail into the water trough and turned toward the door. You can tell him I'll trade bread and stitching, but I won't owe any man favors. I know, Seth said. That's why I offered. That evening, the wind howled through the trees and rattled the shutters. Seth sat by the stove, Nora curled beside him with her quilt, half asleep. Katherine kneaded dough at the table, her sleeves rolled and her brow damp. You ever think about leaving? He asked, his voice low enough not to wake Nora. Plenty, she said, pressing her fists into the dough. But I've left enough places already. You could have gone further west. Oregon's got softer winters. And more strangers. Not all strangers stay strangers, he said. Katherine didn't answer right away. She pulled the dough into a long shape, laid it into the pan, and covered it with a cloth. Then she came over and sat across from him, close enough that her skirt brushed his boot. You didn't come back for nothing, she said. No. Then what do you want? Seth looked at her, really looked. Her hands were raw from cold and work, but her eyes never wavered. I want to be the man who earns your trust, and I want to build something that lasts. With me. With you. Katherine didn't blink. Then you'll need to be patient. I've got patience, he said, and a reason to use it. She leaned back, arms crossed. I don't need saving. I know, he said. I just want to stand beside you while you save yourself. The room fell quiet again, but the air between them had changed. Not softer, but clearer. Katherine reached down and brushed a bit of lint from Nora's sleeve, then looked back at him. If you ever drink again, don't come back. I won't, he said, because I'd rather lose whiskey than lose what I haven't even dared hope for yet. She nodded once, slow. Then she stood, walked to the stove, and stirred the stew gently. Behind her, Seth sat still, the weight in his chest finally beginning to ease. Outside, snow fell steady, muffling the world in white. Inside, the warmth held. The sun hung low behind the ridge, casting long amber shadows across the Sutton homestead. Seth stood beneath the lean-to, oiling the hinges on the barn doors. His shoulders moved slow and steady, sleeves rolled back, forearms streaked with grease. From the house, the thin clang of a ladle against a pot carried through the stillness. Katherine stepped out, tying her apron behind her back. You're wasting oil. That hinge's never been straight. Seth didn't look up. A crooked hinge still opens. Just takes the right hand. She leaned against the post, arms loose at her sides. You always talk like that now? Only when I mean it. A quiet passed between them, not heavy, but settled. Katherine's eyes drifted toward the edge of the pasture where Nathaniel was driving stakes into the hardening earth, measuring out rows for spring planting. He asked me today if you were staying, she said. Seth set the oil can down and wiped his hands on a rag. What did you tell him? That I didn't know yet. He nodded, folding the rag once, then again. Fair answer. I didn't say no. Seth let the weight of that sit a moment. Then he crossed to the fence and rested his hands on the top rail. My father left before I was old enough to speak, he said, voice even. Ma never said much about him, but I remember her hands always working, always tired. I used to think if I worked hard enough, I'd earn a place she didn't have to hold alone. Katherine's eyes followed the movement of a hawk circling far above the trees. And did you? I earned a badge, he said. Then I wore it like it was armor, until it wasn't. You don't wear it now. No, he said. Don't need to prove anything anymore. She walked past him, toward the fence's end where the light hit the field in gold streaks. I used to dream about far-off places. Tennessee, maybe. Blue hills and riverboats. What changed your mind? My daughter, she said. And dirt under my nails that felt like mine. Seth stepped beside her. I never pictured myself staying put. Wanted to ride clear through every canyon west of the Missouri. Thought roots were for folks with softer hearts. And now I want a roof that doesn't leak and a place at someone's table. He looked at her. Doesn't have to be mine. Just has to be real. Katherine met his eyes, steady as the ground beneath them. I don't want a man to fix things. I want one who doesn't break them worse. I can hold to that. She nodded, her gaze drifting to where Nora sat on the porch steps, humming to her doll and kicking her heels against the boards. Nora's been asking for you to read to her again, she said. Then I'll come by after supper. Katherine turned to face him fully. You're not the same man who left 6 years ago. No, he said. That man wouldn't have known how to be still. She studied him, then reached out and buttoned the cuff of his shirt where it had come undone. Her fingers brushed his wrist, just briefly. Come early, she said. The stove's burning low, and the bread won't keep warm without company. He watched her walk back toward the house, braids swinging against her back, boots steady on the packed earth. And for the first time in years, Seth felt the ground beneath his feet was exactly where he belonged. The first hard frost cracked across the fields the morning Seth arrived with a brace of rabbits hanging from one hand and a tin of lard tucked under his arm. He knocked once on the kitchen door, then stepped back, breath curling in the cold air as he waited. Katherine opened it moments later, hair pinned up in a way he hadn't seen before loose at the back, a few strands brushing her neck. She looked at the rabbits, then at him. You planning to feed all of Johnson County? I heard Nora's been asking for stew, he said. Figured I'd earn my bowl. She stepped aside, holding the door open. You'll earn it gutting those. He followed her in, the warmth of the stove blooming across his face. Nora was humming softly from the corner, winding colored thread through a scrap of muslin. Nathaniel sat at the table, carving a sliver of pine into a rough-handled spoon, his strokes careful and sure. Seth set the tin on the counter and unhooked the rabbits outside, stringing them up beneath the eave. When he came back in, Katherine was already dusting flour across the table, sleeves pushed to her elbows. He rolled the sleeves of his own shirt and began working beside her, slicing carrots and onions without being asked. You ever do this before? She asked, lifting her eyes just long enough to catch his. Not well, he said, but I've learned what not to burn. She didn't smile exactly, but there was a softness in her face that hadn't been there weeks before. I used to think I'd never let anyone in this kitchen again, she said quietly, laying strips of dough across the pie tin. This room has held more silence than kindness. Seth turned toward her. There's room now if you want it filled different. She brushed her hands clean on her apron and leaned her hip against the table, watching him. You've never asked what I want. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I want to stop waking up wondering if I'll have to carry it all alone again, she said. That's what I want. He met her gaze without flinching. Then let me carry it with you. Katherine's fingers touched the edge of the table, and for a moment, everything stilled, the stew pot bubbling, Nora's humming, the faint rasp of wood against knife from Nathaniel's end of the room. When spring comes, she said, voice steady, there's a patch out past the fence I've kept clear. I was saving it for wheat, but it might take potatoes better. Seth nodded. I'll dig the rows. And if the roof sags again, I don't want to wait until the rain comes. I'll brace the beams before snowmelt. She stepped forward, close enough that her skirt brushed his leg. "If I build this life with you, I need to know you won't leave halfway through." He reached out slowly, fingers brushing hers. "I'll be here every morning you wake, even the hard ones." Katherine looked at him long, then slid her hand into his. That night, after the children were tucked beneath quilts, and the stew pot scraped clean, she walked him to the porch, lantern in hand. The light cast her face in amber and shadow, and the wind had settled to a hush through the bare branches. "I used to think love was a thing that broke you," she said. "It can," he replied, "but it can build you too if it's real." She reached up and touched his cheek, thumb smoothing along the line of his jaw. "Then I want to build." He bent, slow and sure, and kissed her, his hand settling at her waist like it had always belonged there. Her mouth was warm and sure against his, no hesitation left in her. When they pulled apart, she didn't step back. "You staying?" she asked. "If you want me to." She opened the door behind her. "You'll need to be up early. Nathaniel wants help with the fence line." Seth smiled, quiet and full. "Then I'll be up before him." And he stepped inside. The months passed with thaw and bloom. Seth never missed a morning. He dug fence posts, patched the east wall, and taught Nathaniel how to edge a blade proper. He read stories to Nora by lamplight and learned the rhythm of the kitchen, where the flour was kept, which drawer caught, how Katherine hummed when she was content. By the time the apple tree behind the barn burst into flower, Katherine wore his ring, a simple band, passed down from Seth's mother, and the four of them stood in the clearing beyond the pasture, hands joined, while Reverend Collier spoke the words that bound their lives together. There was no grand party, no fine dress, just a linen shirt, a ribbon in Nora's braid, and the sound of wind in the grass. That night, after the children were asleep, Katherine lay beside him in the small house she no longer held alone. Her head rested in the hollow of his shoulder, her hand over his heart. "I used to think peace was something you had to leave to find," she said. He kissed her temple, slow and sure. "Sometimes it's something you come back to." And under that roof, with no whiskey in his veins and nothing left to run from, Seth Parnell finally found home.